that the reader should get, then you might end up polishing it, trying to get it perfect, what you think is a perfect English, and becomes like a round, polished pebble. You should feel the stone, angularity and the texture of the stone. It should not be a polished round stone. Then it's no different from another round pebble. So the author's peculiarities and his texture, his feel should be there in that. Over-editing also one has to watch out for. Another thing that the editor, if he knows what languages helps, is not only languages, but also dialects. Because Vidya may be more comfortable with the Anthrozi dialect, and Bai is he's a kind of in between of Shashti and Anthrozi and the other Vidya. Okay. So there are sometimes some things about the Catholic culture, way of life, or the names of places, or the names of people, or some custom, which she may not be very familiar with. She may put it in a particular way, spell it in a particular way, and the editor has to make sure that this is acceptable, it's accurate, it's correct, accurate, authentic, and is accepted by people. We should not point out, oh, this is not what she meant, actually was that. So it helps if you know both languages. And I'll just tell you one small example of how an editor can change things drastically to the negative. I sent one story called The Fan to Sunaprant. And it's about an old man in an old age home who looks up at the fan which is turning, and in the sounds of the fan he begins to imagine various things. At the end of the story he dies. He gets heart attack and he dies. And the last line of the story was Ani teen pankhyaan che aanj zaun raat bhor the fan such a rakan paritravne. The fan became like a three-winged angel. The fan stood vigil over him all through the night. When I read the story, it read Ani teen pankhyaan che fan aaj raat taj rakan paritravne. So this Anj became an Aj today, because the editor was probably not familiar with Anj as angel, which may not be there in the general, Anj. It may not be there even in the dictionary. It comes from Portuguese, Anj. So the Catholic community will say Anj, but the editor, if he doesn't know that Anj means angel, he made it Aj. He didn't even ask me, and I was horrified because that was my most favorite line in the whole story.
Throw it open for questions. Any questions? Yeah.
No, actually, I can speak. I mean, I'm not familiar with translation, but I mean, it's quite fascinating to listen to, each one speaking. Two things that I can see here. One is, of course, being as much true to the original meaning of the author, which is coming out. But at the same time also we need to make sure that it's reader friendly or user friendly, as we say today. Now, how does a translator balance these two? Because sometimes if I'm trying to be too literal, to the text or to this, then the translation may not be easy to read. And very often we do have sometimes translation from European languages to English. We find, it's not. Now, for example, the new missal that we have got for the Mass, we find that very difficult when we are reading it. It probably is more true to the Latin text. But in English, it sounds sometimes certain words, the way we read, it's very difficult. So how do you balance this two? Just that is the question.
I think ultimately a translation makes sense only if you take the reader into consideration. You have to make sure that it reads well to the reader, because the reader, if he had the opportunity, he could very well have gone and read the author himself. So that has to be taken very much in mind. But you brought up a very interesting example of the Bible, where I guess too many other things come to the picture. I guess the translators of the Bible into Konkani would need to handle various kinds of language politics. They would have to, they would have to take a policy on what they were going to do with regards to accusations saying that the Konkani text which is produced is too Latinized. In fact, it is not that Latin is the problem there. I feel that the translators of the Konkani Bible went overboard trying to make it more Sanskritized. Thus, and nobody had a clue as to the meaning of those terms, because they have Sanskrit concepts are different from Konkani concepts or Indian to Christian concepts which emerged elsewhere. I'll give you some examples. Our church in Moira is a church of Immaculate Conception. Now, in Konkani, it used to before be called Immaculate Conception. Okay, it was Immaculate Conception. Now, these are totally lifted from Portuguese and brought into Konkani. Now they have changed it into something called, it's a niche kolong Angkwan Moriche. Oh God, it's a tongue twister of a thing. I cannot remember those terms, but it means a Virgin Mary's. It's a literal translation of what those words are into Konkani. It's horrible. What used to be called Komiyam, now it's called Chris Prasad. Prasad has got a different significance from communion. And, I know I could go on like that, but I've lost the point, so I'll just pass it on to Jose.
Father, you're referring to the Bible as the English Bible or the Konkani Bible?
No, actually what I was talking was the English Missal, the new Missal which is used from us.
After the revision of the
Bible, not the Bible. No.
Yeah. And I've seen some changes also have come, as in the Lord be with you, the Lord be with your spirit, and all that. I find it difficult to adjust. I keep saying the old thing. Because I feel that it makes no difference. Words don't change, it's just your spirituality or approach which counts. In terms of translation, when translating into Konkani, and as Agush said, one is politics of language. But I would also look deeper into the purpose of translation, which applies to the Bible as well as to a short story or to an academic essay. What is the purpose of translation? What is the purpose of writing? To communicate. I think something, I will write it down so that you can read it and understand what I am saying. So I will tell my friends around me, then it passes on to the village, then to the state, to other languages, to other countries. Constantly the process of communication is taking place. Provided the essence of what I have to say goes across, the mission is accomplished. The translation and transmission of knowledge or opinions is successful. When Jesus speaks in Aramaic and it's translated into Latin and then translated into English, from English to Konkani, various changes of meaning, semantics takes place. At the core of it, whoever is doing the translation should remember that the lessons of compassion or the parables or that, those should reach the simplest reader who is listening to these words. I don't want to get into the politics of religion or whatever, but in terms of purpose of language, purpose of translation, meaning of message is very important. When we come to stories, what the reader wanted, what the writer wanted to put across has to come across. What his style was also has to come across. In religious texts, you don't have to worry about so much of style as much as message, the accuracy of message. When you try to translate someone like Margao, he has got a very absurdist style, very difficult to translate. And if you do try to literally translate it and put it down in English, somebody who's reading English will say, what is this rubbish? This is all gibberish. I can't understand anything of what's going on here. Because his style was different. some other writers have got a proper linear style of writing. So, two things happen here. One is that genre of writing, as August also said, philosophical or conceptual literature, to get it across to another language is a challenge, is difficult. That is one big thing. And the second thing of conveying it across, my train of thought. This seems to be happening very often. Yeah, but Mambro is very difficult to put across, and there are some other authors also. Oh yes, I got the second thing now. The second thing is that if you find that there is something not easily translated from Konkani into English, you should stand up and clap. Because it clearly means that here is something special in this language which does not have an easy counterpart in the English language. It is something unique to our language, especially if they emerge from our culture, of the Konkani people, we could say, and our ways of doing things, and our thinking things, which is not there easily available in the English language. So we should celebrate. And then go about trying to find a counterpart, or coining a counterpart, to convey this new thing, this beautiful, unique thing about the Konkani language to the rest of the world. So these are various aspects, Jan and the untranslated.
I don't want to really add to it, but the only thing I wanted to say is that Augusto, I think, published a review of Tsunami Simon, in which he mentioned that this novel is not translatable. But I don't know why he said it, but I didn't find it particularly difficult to translate. It was a nice story, a nice adventure story, and I don't know, there has been some accusation against Margao that he's a very good short story writer, but not as good a novelist. Now, I would tend to agree a little, because in Tsunami Simon, as I was translating it, I felt this could have been expanded. Means, as befitting a novel, take the story a little further, expand it a little, but he was very strict. He said, wado pa naka, he said, you know. But anyway, that's one thing I would say that a short story writer could keep in mind when writing a novel, that there's a lot of padding which could be done, which could make it more interesting. And another thing that I'd like to say is that Leonard asked whether it is, asked to say whether it is better to know both the languages whilst editing. Now in this case, since the 3 books that I have translated of Margao have been published by All India publishers, that leeway was not given to us, and the person doing the editing did not have a knowledge of Konkani at all. So we had a lot of back and forth emails, because the way it was edited was not acceptable to me, and when I put it to Bai, he also did not agree. But in this case, Jose had definitely an advantage. He is very competent in English, very competent in Konkani, and while he was editing that book, which had been translated by a person who is not in Goa and is not very familiar with Goan Konkani, he definitely had an advantage, and Leonard was very lucky to get him. Because having a knowledge of both languages is essential. Like, my strong point is English, but even though I may not be able to translate from English into Konkani with the same felicity, I have a very, I would say, fairly good mastery over Konkani, and my familiarity with Bai makes it even more so, because you have to be a student all your life. I keep on learning. So that knowledge of Konkani was very important, and I could put it into English in the best possible way, because English is my forte. That's all.
Yeah.
The literature from regional languages translated into English and then again from English translated into other regional languages means one piece is being translated twice. Do you think the essence is lost somewhere? Is there any risk of?
Yes. It's obvious because you see, I believe now my novel is translated into 12 or more languages.
But that may be from directly
That's
from
what I
Konkani
mean.
to
Yes,
that Bengali
I'm coming to
language.
the same point because I don't think a Odia writer knew Konkani when he translated. So I always believe that anything worth translating, the meritorious writings in any language can reach out to the wider readership only when it is translated into other languages. And that is why we require a filter language. A source language is good that if the translator knows the source language and the target knowledge is good to speak about, to talk about. But then it is not always possible. So we use the filter language. The Hindi and English serve as filter languages for translators. So when my novel was translated into Odia, Asamiya or Bangla, they either use English or Hindi, but sometimes both. So I think it is my fellow writers should take note of this, that their writings must be made available in Hindi and English first, so that other translators in other regional languages find it difficult to use these languages. These or these both can as a filter languages. So, and as I earlier said, I can access to the 3 languages which I know before they are published. If they are translated into, say, Marathi, Hindi, or English. But then what when it is translated into Tamil? It has been translated into Tamil. I don't know how good it is. It is impossible for me to know. So that sometimes it is at risk also. Sometimes they don't understand the concepts, particularly the cultural concepts, very difficult to translate. Some nuances, very difficult. Then it turns out sometimes terrible. For example, when Chandrakant Keni's collection of stories were translated, the original title is Vakal Pauni. Vakal Pauni is bridal farewell. But then, unfortunately, it was translated as bridal auction. Pauni becomes auction, and Vakal becomes bride. So they make bridal auction. And it was published, and she got the award. The news came that Konkani book, Vakal Pauni, in translation bridal auction, got the award. But then these things, sometimes translator has no access to the writer, so it can happen.
You know, I don't think that you worry very much about the translation. I'm pretty sure because it's not that there are some very difficult concepts that needed to be translated. Your flow of your narrative, the conflicts, the resolution of those conflicts, the twist in the tail at the end of the thing, all those things can be translated. So that's not a worry. I just would like to come back to one earlier point. Somebody brought up the issue of should the translator be good in both languages? I feel that the translator, he or she has to be very, very skilled in the use of the target language, the language into which he or she is translating. He should have the ability to try and imagine how it would look in this particular style. What if he could write it in a Shakespearean kind of a way? Or what if he, change the tense? What if you put something which is directly written in direct speech, you put it in indirect speech, or vice versa? Try to imagine these kinds, because you do need various types of solutions to every problem that comes up. However, as far as the source language is concerned, you can know I mean, however much you might know a language, there will always be things which might be difficult for you, but you can always find them out. I say I speak Konkani. Okay, I had come across some phrase there. So there was a kurkuto yellow and ta. Kurkuto like and ta and thing. By good. Because you are using this, you are praying for positive every other day, probably you are taking those things, they are tala and those kind of little symbols which are used. And I couldn't translate Kurkuto as an altar, because that has got a different significance altogether. So, then you got to find out what is the right solution to these problems which arise in translation.
If you can answer a particular question about whether nuances get lost in translation.
Yes. Yeah, I would like to tell about two little experiments, you could say. One was that, when we were children, we would play this broken telephone game. One person would whisper in the other's ear and you whisper until that 10th person tells you something quite funny, which doesn't match the first thing that was told at all. Broken telephone. Chinese whispers. Yeah. So I did a little experiment online. Google Translate is there. So I took one poem or a paragraph of text from English. I said, now translate to Portuguese. Portuguese to French. French to Chinese. Chinese to Korean. Korean to Swahili. Swahili to... Like this, I took it on some 8 or 10 loops of different languages. And then I came back by the same path. I reached back to English and I looked at what came out of that whole process. It had completely changed. I put a poem, this Robert Frost's, one of Robert Frost's poem, the title of the poem was The Solidified Sea. The Solidified Sea or something like that. So, as a machine which does not think in terms of meaning and emotion, it will give you this kind of answers. That's why we have to be careful when we use mechanized translation. But as a human being who is very perceptive to all these things, he will do. There's always a risk when you're going from Konkani to Hindi to Tamil or from Tamil to Malayalam or something like that. Maybe a subtle thing will change. Now how did Carmelin react to the advances of her elder boss? Did she suffer? Did she take some pleasure in their relationship? Now, author, the translator somewhere may at some point put in his perspective, and where Carmelin suffered a lot, then it might be sort of slightly this way that maybe she took pleasure out of it. So nuances can get affected. If there are subtle nuances which an author very often uses, they can get affected. But as Agus says, if it is clear in the narrative, there are many incidents which point to one thing, that she was harassed and she was abused, then the message of the story comes across, even if it has gone many cyclic translations. That's why it's important for the author to know how ambiguous or how borderline some of his narrative is. If it is straightforward, clear-cut, strong, it will come across, it will survive multiple translations, let's put it that way. And if it's ambiguous and very philosophical, it will be difficult and he has to watch out for a possible distortion. Otherwise somebody will not might come up and ask that person, I learned so incident, and he said, what is it? Okay, just one small thing I wanted to add here is that the need for translation. I have asked many authors, out of our Sahitya Akademi award-winning works, kitli pustak hai English mein, Mahi is one of the most prolific. Carmelin has been translated. But in that whole list of Sahitya Akademi books, all these Himalaya or whatever, nothing has been translated into English. Maybe one or two, I may not be aware of. So now we have got how many? 25 years? 25 or 30 works, Sahitya Akademi award-winning works in Konkani, and only one or two may have been translated in English. So the finest of Konkani literature has not reached the rest of the world. What a mockery this is. I think a body like Konkani Yeah, even Pune or Kokri Kalpi or whatever institutions there, we should be working toward them. And we as translators, we have to be also driving this movement to push Kokri literature to the world. Otherwise it becomes a joke. And the second thing is that I am really afraid that a time will come when somebody publishes a book, only 10 people read it, and it gets a Sahitya Akademi award or some other kind of award. Everybody comes to the award, everybody buys books, the book is lying at the library at home, nobody reads it. So what merit does that book which only 10 people have read and is celebrated as a award-winning book, what merit does it have? What is the test for that? Translate it. Translate it and throw it open to the rest of the world and let everyone see what the literature is. Let us be very brutal and ruthless to test our Kokri literature and compare it. Let's not hide behind Kokri. I have written this in Kokri, the book, Shamlyan, I have won some awards, 2-3 awards. And I'm not talking about Pai, of course, he deserves every merit that he has got. But we are running the risk that the more the number of Kokri readers reduce, the more risks we run of mediocre work being celebrated, which is completely wrong and hypocritical. That's why translation is very much required.
Any other questions?
Are there any lawyers in the audience?
Or having legal knowledge.
About contracts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have written. The thing is that during Goa Art and Literature Festival, we got many questions about the nature of contracts that people sign or that people should sign during the whole process of translation. And I just made a few notes, and I hope someone will stop me when it gets boring. But just a few things to think about when you're signing a contract, whether you're an author or whether you're a translator. Firstly, if you're an author, a few points to keep about is that the author has to give permission to translate. That means somebody cannot go and publish a translation of your book without your permission. It doesn't only have to be knowledge, it has to be permission also. So you have to give permission to translate. So many times it has happened is that, I don't know anything, but there were authors who said, I didn't know there was a translation being published, and now I got to know about it and things like that. But there are two contracts that are signed during a translation. Usually it's only one contract, but the author and the translator both sign contracts during translation. And the author's contract states that the author has given permission to translate. So just to remind the authors in this room that there cannot be a translation without your permission.
What about the 70 years have passed? Copyright is for 70 years.
We are talking about living authors or authors whose copyrights have not expired. That is, copyright expires 60 years after the death of the author. So we are talking about,
Again, counter question, that is someone like Romas is there for me, it's Reginald Bernard, and maybe 70 years have not passed, but he's dead.
So next of kin.
I can't locate his family.
Yeah. So you have to provide sufficient evidence to show that you have tried to locate his family or tried to locate next of kin. The second one is that again the author is made to sign this contract saying that it has to be a faithful rendition of the translation. And like Mr. Mauser pointed out, he always insists on that the translation is a faithful rendition of the translation. So it cannot be something totally new and changed, because there is this fascination for small books that can be sold at $199 or $225, where publishers have forced the translators to give an abridged version of the book or change the ending to make it more. The translated version and the original version should match in that aspect. I mean, the plots cannot change, or you suddenly have kind of characters appearing and disappearing. So things like that. Secondly is the copyright issues. You cannot lift up, like for example, if Augusto Pinto has written Coins Cattle, and then somebody else is translating Mauser's bigger work, which has Coins Cattle in it. You cannot copy Augusto and say it's mine. So that part of the copyright has to be there. The work has to be originally the translator's. You have to take care about that. Author has a right to check.